Tensions rise in Jerusalem as the Jewish and Arab communities share mixed feelings about the Al-Ali Arab hospital blast in Gaza.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak becomes the latest leader to travel to Israel, while German Chancellor Scholz called on Hamas to release Israeli hostages. Mourners in northern France gathered for the funeral of the French teacher who was stabbed to death by a former student outside a school last week. The European Parliament awards the Sakharov Prize to Mahsa Amini and the social movement sparked by her death, Women, Life, Freedom.
The blast at Al-Ali Arab hospital in Gaza and the hundreds killed have caused a shockwave in public opinion in the region. Words such as massacre and devastation are often used. But who was to blame? Euronews went to assess reactions in the Jewish and Arab communities in Jerusalem. Talia has lost family members in last week's Hamas attack. She blames the militants for starting this wave of violence, but not all Palestinians.
I like Arab. I don't have something with Arab. I work with Arab. We are joking. We have everything is good. Why to be like this? Why?
The presence of the military has become more common as Israel's call-up of reservists continues. Yosef often demonstrates against the government alongside Palestinian peace activists. He says Hamas must be destroyed for any hope of peace and says militants in Gaza are responsible for the tragic explosion.
It's definitely not our bomb. It was an accident from the jihad. And yes, today we showed it to the whole world that it's not our bomb. They put human being as a protect for them. And they don't care.
Among the Arab communities in East Jerusalem, most people were reluctant to appear on camera, fearing harassment from the police from what they could say. But one man did agree to give his opinion anonymously.
You could easily tell Israelis and then Americans are right behind. They're not interested in Gaza anymore and its people.
I want to send message for all over the world. Pray for God. صلوا لله. صلوا لله عشان ينجينا ويحمينا ويحمي أولادكم ويحمي أبنائكم. دخيل الله صلوا لله.
Everybody here is in shock. Now they feel this is a new escalation in the conflict, and more than ever, people fear that this could turn into a regional conflict. We're yet to see what's going to happen in the north of Israel, near the border with Lebanon. I'm Valerie Goria in Jerusalem for Euronews.
Following visits by top EU officials and the US President, Rishi Sunak is the latest leader to visit Israel on a diplomatic mission. The British Prime Minister said he wants to show the UK's solidarity with Israel. He had talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, at which he was expected to push for the opening of the Rafah border crossing to allow aid to reach civilians. He's also planned to meet Arab leaders during his two-day trip. The German Chancellor has been briefing his parliament following his visit to the region. Olaf Scholz called on Hamas to release the Israeli hostages it's holding.
Viele von denen, die dort verschleppt worden sind, waren, das haben mir ihre Angehörigen geschildert, immer die vordersten Aktivisten für eine friedliche Entwicklung in der Region. Und das muss hier auch gesagt werden. Wir setzen uns für die Befreiung der Geiseln ein.
Scholz also lashed out at the Russian President Vladimir Putin's warning about civilian casualties in the conflict. In the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, he described the remarks as cynical. Moscow has sent a consignment of humanitarian aid to Egypt for distribution among civilians in Gaza. It comes after Israel announced it would allow limited deliveries following a request from US President Joe Biden during his recent visit.
The EU's top officials head to Washington Friday for the first official summit between both sides in over 2 years. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Charles Michel were supposed to be meeting US President Joe Biden in what looked like a routine trip to deal with outstanding trade issues, among other things. But the war between Israel and Hamas threatens to overshadow the summit, particularly after a week of confused messaging coming out of Brussels.
I think that this topic can't not be in some way on the agenda.
The first thing is that the EU needs to speak with one voice, and then we can coordinate with our transatlantic partners.
Even if the conflict in the Middle East dominates discussions, it doesn't hide the fact that the EU and US still have a lot on their own plates. First up, steel and aluminium. The issue has been ongoing since the Trump era after the former president slapped tariffs on European steel and aluminium exports. But now, in what looks like a double-pronged attack against Beijing, the EU is expected to announce both an anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese steelmakers and an agreement with the US to curb the export of Chinese metals, which they say are flooding the global market.
The solution that is being negotiated now is a so-called carbon club, or an agreement between the US and the United States to basically promote the production of sustainable, sort of decarbonized steel, and put tariffs on countries that don't produce in a decarbonized way, aka, of course, China.
EU officials have also said they're closing in on a deal on critical raw materials, minerals used in the production of batteries for electric vehicles. This would allow European car makers to benefit from any US subsidies granted under Biden's so-called Inflation Reduction Act, in this case designed to promote the use of American-made electric vehicles. Christopher Pitchers for Euronews.
Ukraine's parliament has given initial approval to a law that would ban religious organizations with connections to the Kremlin. Kiev accuses the Ukrainian Orthodox Church specifically of collaborating with Russia after its invasion of Ukraine last year. The church has said it's not aligned with the Russian Orthodox Church. A second reading of the bill is needed before it becomes law. Meanwhile, a Russian artillery strike on the port city of Kherson has injured at least 3 people. City officials say the shelling targeted residential areas. The ongoing strikes are forcing people to leave for safer locations. Damage caused by the regular shelling has made many homes impossible to live in.
The European Parliament has awarded the Sakharov Prize to Mahsa Amini, the young Kurdish Iranian who died last year after being arrested for allegedly violating Iran's mandatory headscarf law. The prize was also awarded to the social movement that was sparked by Amini's death, Women, Life, Freedom. The Sakharov Prize for Freedom and Conscience is the highest tribute paid by the EU in the field of human rights. The award recognises the work and bravery of tens of thousands of Iranian women who took to the streets for months to protest Amini's death in defiance of the Iranian regime. The protests spread quickly throughout the country and only ended after a bloody repression that left more than 500 dead and some 22,000 detained. Last year's prize was awarded to the people of Ukraine for their resistance to Russia's invasion and defiance in the ongoing war.
The European Commission is ramping up pressure on social media platforms to crack down on what it considers violent content, false information and hate speech. It's launched an investigation into Meta and TikTok, asking them to explain what they're doing to comply with new digital rules. It follows a spike in posts related to the Israel-Hamas war in breach of the EU Digital Services Act. The request is the first step in a procedure that could result in costly penalties if the platforms fail to comply. The new rules took effect in August. They require big tech companies to stop a wide range of illegal content from flourishing on their platforms. Brussels sent its first formal request to Elon Musk's social media site X last week. The billionaire is said to be considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's availability in the EU or blocking users from accessing it. The EU is also considering removing the app's
There was emotion and tension in equal measure at the funeral of the French teacher who was stabbed to death by a radicalised former student outside a school in Arras last week. A large police presence watched over the some 600 people who gathered in the town square to pay their respects to Dominique Bernard.
Je suis très émue, ça m'a énormément affectée de me dire qu'on peut perdre la vie en allant à l'école et puis que ça touche une ville comme Arras, qui est ma ville. Je suis en colère de me dire qu'aujourd'hui, dans un pays comme le nôtre, on en arrive à de telles situations. Et puis j'ai peur pour l'avenir.
J'habite à quelques centaines de mètres du lycée. Mes enfants ont été eux-mêmes au lycée. Je ne connaissais pas directement ce professeur, mais c'est un professeur de l'éducation nationale et je pense qu'il fallait être là aujourd'hui.
Bernard was made a Knight of the Legion of Honor by the French President Emmanuel Macron on Thursday. His killer was charged with murder in connection with a terrorist plot and imprisoned on Tuesday evening. UN experts have been testing fish samples in Fukushima Prefecture for the first time since wastewater from the nuclear plant was released in August. One of the International Atomic Energy Agency team said it did not expect to find elevated levels once testing is completed. China and Russia have suspended imports of Japanese seafood since the treated water was discharged. Japan says the discharges are not harmful to humans or the environment. The facility was devastated by a tsunami in 2011.